Hello, Darel Ross.
What up, Paul?
You're listening to State of the Start. It's where we talk about innovation, entrepreneurship, ecosystem building, making a great city for people to start things and to grow businesses and to make their lives better through the work that they can get off the ground and their great ideas. So, this week,
State of the Start, powered by Star Garden.
This week, or maybe I should
All
say
of the
this
above.
month, full disclosure, we've been
on summer vacation.
on summer vacation. We haven't spent a whole lot of time together. Everybody's been bouncing around, doing things. It's been busy.
So what was the highlight of your summer, P. Moore?
Honestly, I think this summer was weird. So this summer, and I don't know if this happens everywhere, but it definitely happens in Michigan, where it feels like everything moves at like half speed.
Right.
Like everything. Setting up a meeting, so quite frankly, the stuff I'm most excited about is the stuff we're working on right now because I've been anticipating getting to it all summer because everything's moved so slow.
While summer moves twice as fast because you literally have 7 weeks of summer in Michigan now.
Yeah. Anyway,
We're back.
Well,
what are we talking about this episode?
I think we should talk about innovation because we got off on this topic the other day. And it's something that is synonymous with entrepreneurship. You know, as soon as somebody finds out you're working in a startup community, they're like, "Oh, tell me about the most innovative companies you know about. What are the most innovative ideas that people are working on? What are people usually asking?" Well, I mean, sometimes they might have it like, "What's just like a really cool technology? You know, can I, touch this table and all of a sudden something happens over on the other side of the room and it also told me what my blood pressure is." I don't know.
Right. How thin can I get the new TV?
Type
of thing.
Super, super thin TVs. Then there's kind of like the more specific stuff, like maybe it's more like your ecosystem. So we live in Beer City, USA. We have incredible beer when you consider how much beer is available per person in the city. It's probably a staggering amount of really good quality beer. And so there might be people that are more like, "Oh, what's happening that's really innovative in the beer
In that space.
industry?" And then I think what we spend a lot of time at Star Garden thinking about is more like system innovation,
Right.
which is a totally, I think, different beast. Now, I've seen systems studied, like, for instance, grocery shopping, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is getting into a car, going to a place, walking in, filling a basket, unloading a basket, taking everything that was in the basket, putting it into a bag, moving all those things with the bags into the trunk, unpacking all those things back in your kitchen counter, and then putting all that stuff away in cabinet. Like it's actually, when you think about just all the steps involved, it's a weirdly complicated process, right?
I think I've taken this complicated process and narrowed it down to 2 specific questions that will answer if you're doing good innovation. Question 1, what are you innovating to solve? What problem is your innovation addressing? And 2, for whom are you innovating? I think
I like where
I think
this is going.
I think if you're not starting with those 2 questions, you might be innovating for the sake of innovating, using technology for the sake of technology, spinning wheels, perpetuating the status quo, whatever your catchphrase of the day is. But to me, and I would say through our lens around innovation, it's really about the unique problem set you're solving, and for what group of people. So like you said, that group could be beer drinkers, right? But without identifying those 2 things.
But so here I'll tell you the dirty little secret about the world of innovation, meaning innovation practice, meaning business innovation training.
How'd you get this secret? Are you like the
from
Closet
my
Innovator
from
Club or something?
My work, my experience.
All right.
This has been my profession here,
There you go.
Darel Ross. No, here's the dirty little secret. In the world of innovation, which is specifically business innovations. Now, you'll know that you're kind of like in the business innovations room, in the point that like everybody in the company like that's in this room is wearing jeans and there's Post-it notes all over the walls. There's usually
do you do the bubble dot voting exercise next to the idea afterwards?
There can be some butterfly voting, or the
worst.
bubble dot voting. There can be, but that's more for like consensus building. So, but there's all sorts of different methods. Usually, there's like some expensive casual shoes that people are wearing, and a lot of really amazing looking presentations,
or the
posters.
cheapest damn sandals ever.
Or all right,
they go to extremes
because you can go ironic on that one. But yeah, and there's just like a really beautifully designed presentations, and maybe even some prototypes. The problem is, and this is I think the bane of the existence for most people who work in this space, is that you rarely ever get to see your thing that you've been working on come into the real world, because getting to the point that you've ideated and prototyped and delivered the concept, usually at that point, either if you're doing it for a client or you're doing it internally at a company or an organization, at that point the system is what it is, and the company does what it does, and your new thing that's now actually what everyone else sees is it's just a whole bunch of new work that I have to do, right? Think about trying to do something innovative in city government when most people you're going to encounter just like, you making me think now I have to like come up with a new process for how we're going to do your thing. Like, this is the way we do it. I want to get home by 5:05 p.m. So the dirty secret is that most ideas die. This is the bane of the existence for somebody that does this work, because they don't get to see them come to fruition. And it comes out of a world where you get paid a lot of money just to get to that point.
Of getting it to die?
Getting it to the point that's delivered. It's something that can now be put on a shelf. It's a nice presentation that can be, sent through meetings for the next month or two. You can make a ton of money just getting to there, and not having to do the 2 or 3 year long slog of trying to make something come into existence after the idea has been delivered. So it's lucrative, but it's also kind of painful, because you never really
just birthing ideas.
Yeah.
Never raising them.
Yeah. It's most of the work exists on Post-it notes. It doesn't actually happen in the world. So I think where you were going that was really interesting is when you say what and for whom, what you're also saying is you're asking maybe the most interesting questions, which is if it's, let's say, and I'll just use this as an example, just because the company's so huge, everybody would know about it. Like Procter and Gamble, who does like Tide soap and Colgate toothpaste or something. It's kind of assumed. It's like, these are our customers that buy these things. We're innovating for them. But I think where you're getting into this space is more like, if you're going to innovate on a system level, you don't come in with this predefined, this is historically who always benefited from the work that we do. You might come in and say, who would have been beneficiaries had we started doing this thing today? Whom should this exist for?
Yeah, and I think I'm saying it's 2019, so I think we just have to raise up. It's not innovative to make your product better, right? That's so if we're talking technology, products, that's not disruptive. So to me, I just think in 2019, with the application of technology, with that intersectionality of how technology can be used to address social issues and provide opportunity, I just think we have to all hold ourselves to a higher level. But yeah, I don't think it's innovative because my lotion makes me less ashy for 2 more hours, right? That's product development and so forth. But now if Procter and Gamble set off to come up with a product that X percentage of, infants suffer from this skin condition, and now they're able to remedy that. That's innovation. It's the same. It's the same with a lot of technologies, right? I think me and you were having a conversation of, is it technology for technology's sake, or are you solving a real problem, with the theory that if you use innovation / technology to solve the most complicated problems for the most complicated populations, it automatically becomes easier to apply those wins to other demographics and so forth. So again, just the raising the expectations and standards of those of us who call ourselves innovators to just really say, are you innovating? Who's different now? Whose life is categorically different? What ill is your innovation addressing? Or, are you just making fun things to play with? And that's cool. And to your point, I think that where you were going with that, you can make a lot of money and not necessarily make substantive changes with your innovation. And I think, again, at Start Garden, I would say we're looking for that intersectionality of where the innovation actually has the biggest impact on bigger issues that are going on in our community and bigger opportunities in our community.
Yeah. So this is where you could say a lot of what we call innovation is really seen through this lens. What we call innovation is really innovating on a first world problem, is a way you might say it, Whereas like for, if someone said, well, let's talk about what's new in fintech, you might be talking about an app that helps someone pay down their student loan faster. Now that's useful, right? That's something that can be incredibly helpful to a person who's paying down their student loan faster. But there's also this assumption that there's this person out there who's really, just working really hard to attempt to pay down their student loan, and it's such a burden. And if only that could just be a little bit easier, if there, if there was a task that could be removed from that, then there's as an individual, it's such a responsible person, they would then do that. Or if there was a way that they could monitor their baby while being able to work at the same time, they would, choose this new technology that you're offering that they would use that to be able to win that time and that productivity and that efficiency. A lot of these new things that I think we see just sort of popping up around, sort of like popcorn, especially in the technology space, or they're almost like time efficiency hacks.
Oh yeah, I mean, think of one of your examples you just used is the monitoring. So think of a real world problem, infant mortality. We know there's staggering differences in infant mortality between communities of color and your white populations.
Well, maybe we don't know. So maybe we should actually.
If you don't know, so even in Grand Rapids, which I would say is a pretty thriving mid-sized city, you're more likely a black married female with a master's degree is more likely to have a miscarriage or a low birth baby than a smoking white single female. And those results are pretty consistent across the USA. So when you take this real problem of infant mortality and you take tech, so what if, instead of making baby monitors where, affluent people can watch their kids as they're at the pool or watching them nap, we actually use that same technology and somehow applied it to reduce infant mortality. So again, it could be a lot of times the same technology, but it's the what are you using it for? Why are you innovating it? And again, increasing that. I just had another example. The iPhone, I think, is one of the biggest innovations. I think it drastically changed everything, right?
Yeah, it changed that whole industry, yeah.
One of the biggest innovations, I would say, though, is the ability now for people who are deaf and have those type of elements to actually communicate in real time with FaceTime. Mm-hmm. So again, it's what are you innovating for, and how are we using technology to really help real life people? Because again, I think it's safe to say that if you can figure out how to get two deaf people to communicate, then me and you are going to have a pretty damn good conversation on that same technology, right?
yeah, from 1,000 miles away.
Right.
Yeah, so I think but let's talk about racialized outcomes. And what are the things that actually have racialized outcomes that are measured, that have been established over decades
or what are the
of
things
data?
that don't?
Because but I mean, and racialized outcome, just by way of anyone who's like new to this space, we're talking about all things being equal. Right. Same kids come from the same household income, same gender, same education, same school, all things equal, except as soon as you toggle that one switch that says what their race is, all of a sudden the outcomes shift dramatically.
So this is how I like to set this conversation up. We know everybody's listening is not a racist. Everybody's good people. So this is not about an individual. It's not about how you care about different individuals. This is about when, regardless of how you care, the outcomes are desperate for one group over the other, right? So I use the example, if a teacher comes into a classroom and gives a math test, and 90% of the class fails, it's the teacher's fault probably more than the individual student. So again, we want to talk about just these outcomes that regardless of the individual player seem to perpetuate, because I would say one of the problems you get when talking about racialized outcomes is that word race and racism, and everybody opts out of it. I think the only thing worse probably than being a racist is to be a great person who actually has humanity but wakes up every day and still perpetuates racialized outcomes.
Well,
right?
and I would even say, take it a step further. I don't think you don't get racialized outcomes from an ignorant jerk who's, using the N-word, or a teacher who singles out like this one student, now that's, and it's clear, like, okay, that's this person's doing a very clear act. Like those are not actual, those don't
we're not
generate
talking
outcomes.
personal responsibility.
And
I mean, you could be, it doesn't matter your race, right? You can be black, Latino, white, and still contribute to racialized outcomes. Think about judges in California. Arguably, California is one of the most liberal places, probably has some of the most black and brown judges, more black and brown judges than a lot of states. You'll still get locked up. It still locks up more black and brown people with the 3 strikes law than any other state, or when that 3 strikes law was in. So again, it's not about your intent or waking up or how you feel. Mm-hmm. It's a system that perpetuates ills or inequality, and I think that's what we have to look at. Again, infant mortality is something going on when the infant mortality rates between women of color and white population are so different, right? That's not a racist doctor killing kids, or that's not a healthcare system that's not acclimated, right? So what are those things that are going on? And I mean, we can go
down a list of like things that are just very commonly measured, because I think this is what getting into that. What are real world problems that innovation can measure itself against, as far as what it impacts, and what are really first world problems that a lot of us get sort of the shiny new object gets all the attention, but it's actually just sort of fixing, again, this notion of a very hyper productive person who just needs 20% more time to address something that they want to get done.
Well, I mean, there's many markers, I think, from I guess cradle to grave, right? So that have these outcomes. I mean, if you look at infant mortality again, kindergarten readiness, a lot of educational markers, the 3rd grade reading scores, 7th grade math scores, high school graduation rates, college entrance and graduation rates, income inequality, which we know is not the result of an individual actor. Even in this city of Grand Rapids, if you're living 49507, historically that they've been at a 30% unemployment rate for the last 50, 60, 70 years. If you contrast that, we had an official recession with a full bailout of banking and everybody when I think the majority population unemployment rate hit 11-12%. So, I mean, we have communities that have been in a constant state of economic depression for decades, which kind of lead to this. Incarceration rates, life expectancy, all of these, we would say quality of life factors and income factors and everything, a lot of what we work on, if you don't really take into account the racialized outcomes of them, you may just be solving first world problems. And again, from an innovation standpoint and profitability standpoint, you can be very well off. But as far as innovating to leave your mark or innovating to make a change in the world, that's a totally different lens.
Yeah.
And a huge opportunity, I'd say.
Yeah. And I don't think, I don't think it's not necessarily our job or anyone's job, especially for those of us that work with startups in the startup space, to somehow shoehorn an entrepreneur's venture into, affecting one of these massive problems. And by the way, that list that you went down, I mean, a lot of those things are the markers that are measured because that's what we have longitudinal data for, through school systems and through tax returns and things like that. And it's not to say that every single startup has to impact that. I think it's more like we're just trying to say when we're talking about innovation and we're talking about entrepreneurship, and especially for those of us that are ecosystem builders and we're trying to address creating a city that's much better for entrepreneurship, maybe the goal is to say, to what end and for whom? And where is the work that we're doing, and where are the companies that we're working with? Do we have an eye on what are the real world problems that we actually want to see affected over the course of years, decades? Or are we sort of just chasing, the next, like, here's another sensor?
Yeah, well, and I think historically, entrepreneurship, profitability, and social concerns have been mutually exclusive, arguably. I think innovation allows us to actually look at that different. Through innovation, you can actually hit all three of those things. You don't have to pick on just profitability or just being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, true innovation gives you the opportunity to really address those in concert. And it's really that intersectionality of those activities that are the good products, are the good businesses, and going to be the competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Without innovation, I would say we go right back to doing the status quo, and now you're just addressing one of those. You're just entrepreneurial or driven by profits, or what do we hear all the time? Social enterprise.
Right.
And again, I think from my lens, our lens, it's innovation bridges those worlds.
And I think a lot of the very first argument that we thrown out is like, when you're trying to get off the ground, the very first customer you're really looking at is like, well, who can pay the most money for this? It's almost like the strategy of like the luxury automobile. Like, we'll put the most features into the thing that costs the most, and then once we get to scale, some of those features can start to appear more affordable to the more affordable. It's usually the same strategy in the startup space, where it's like, well, we can only afford to go after the highest paying customers, so we can deal with the least amount of people who are paying the most the fastest. Again, I won't begrudge anybody their sort of rollout strategy. I just think that the question then becomes like, how does that fundamentally alter the DNA of a thing? When it's like, we'll roll it, especially when you're talking about in the context of a city, when it's something that's going to have an impact, like, say, delivering groceries. Right? Let's just say it's a new startup around grocery delivery. But when the target is like, okay, it's going to be a really densely populated downtown where everybody's, earning like well into the six figures, and we're going to roll the service out. I get it. Like, that's where you feel like you need to go to prove out the model the fastest.
Which we would flip, right? I mean,
is there a plan B where, you can get actually to the food to the people that are hardest to reach?
What about if you launch that in
most?
a food desert and you figured out how to get the food to the people who need it the most? I'm almost sure you can then use that same model to get it to those who have the most in the suburbs and so forth. Yeah. So again, I think it's just elevating
automatically
those expectations.
Scales.
Yes,
it doesn't have to scale backward toward how can we do this way cheaper for a lot more people. It scales very quickly upward, which we've already figured out how to do it. Now we just need to replicate it. For every other context, which is now easier to do.
So I mean, I think again, if you're in an entrepreneurial space, or more over than that, if you're an innovator, I think we're asking yourself to really to challenge yourself and ask yourself, who and what are you innovating for?
So let's talk about May Mobility. So May Mobility is a Ann Arbor based
autonomous vehicle.
Autonomous shuttle vehicle. Right now, Grand Rapids has, I believe, the longest autonomous shuttle line in the world, with the most turns, the most technology, because it's not just the vehicle technology, but it's also the infrastructure around the vehicle, so they can make turns, account for a lot of different variables. And it's a pilot that we actually, with primarily through the program that is called Seamless, which is part of the Start Garden group of programs. It's running a pilot for the next year, big, complex pilot that involves city, government, as well as private enterprise. There may have even been like foundations involved in that one. Yeah. So I mean, as far as that one, it's in the downtown.
Yeah,
it's on a pre-established shuttle route for a bunch of parking lots that are
same concept though, right? So I think when we were shooting for May Mobility and we did this autonomous vehicle, we wanted to make sure that it could be applied for last mile for real things, right? So healthcare systems, getting patients to doctors, alleviating tension on public transportation, and so forth. So we actually, one of the reasons it has the most stops is we actually have it following one of the bus routes. Because again, we don't want to innovate for the sake of innovating. We easily could have purchased a couple acre track, had it go in circles, put some obstacles in front of it, see how it responded. But again, we're very keenly aware that if we can use autonomous vehicles to solve that last mile for real people as it comes to moving them to appointments, to jobs, to medical, and so forth, again, the logic is we can easily then scale it up to the affluent who want it more as a luxury in their Teslas or something like that. And I would say,
somebody
candidly,
from
that
their
is
favorite restaurant that lives downtown and is eating downtown,
and candidly, that's the lens of Start Garden working with the Seamless Accelerator is to make sure that tension exists, and that, again, because it's so easy for accelerators and people in the innovation space and people funded with VC to think profitability, speed, and everything except the underlying opportunity of this technology. And a lot of technology has some real opportunity to really make some great changes in the world, in a community. But again, we're not challenging our innovation departments and our innovators and our entrepreneurs to think bigger than their launch and their profitability.
Yeah, that word opportunity. I was thinking, if you had you have two conversations back to back, two different startups that you're meeting with. The first startup comes in and says, I was able to grow a corn stalk in the middle of Iowa, and I think I could scale this to like 1 billion corn stalks. And then you said, okay, that's interesting. You go to the next meeting. The next meeting is an entrepreneur that says, I was able to grow a corn stalk in the middle of the Arizona desert. And I think we're going to have the ability to maybe turn that into like 10 acres, based on what we discovered from that. Which conversation's more interesting,
Right.
And which one would you call the opportunity and the opportunity space? And it's funny because you would think people would have it more in their head. Like, no, the opportunity space is when somebody achieves something that was really hard, that seemed like a lot of other people wrote off as you wouldn't be able to do it. But really, we go after the opportunities that we already saw someone else succeed in doing.
It would be, corn in Iowa. Let's double down on that. Again, not even thinking like, hell, if you can grow it in the middle of the desert, I'm sure you'd be like super successful in Iowa.
Yeah, I heard one venture capitalist say once, like they're only interested in something that they'll first react to as being highly unlikely, because if they don't react that it's highly unlikely, it means it's probably already been done better, and they recorded that somewhere. This person recorded it somewhere in her head that's going to happen. And so if she gravitates towards it, the actual signal she's looking for is, what's the one that my first reaction is like, I don't know. Super skeptical because I haven't seen it before. Not super skeptical because I've seen it 1,000 times,
And you said the key word, she. That's why we need diversity in VC. Because that is not your knee-jerk reaction from a lot of venture capital people.
Yeah. So that's the Start Garden thesis on innovation and what's interesting. And we work, and I should say, as far as for anybody that's working in this space where you're an ecosystem builder and you're working with innovators and you're working with entrepreneurs, we work with our fair share of people that are developing the app that they can develop out of their basement, and they're just trying to go for, find out where their market is and what it is. We work with small businesses. We work with everyone under the sun, and it's never easy to get anything off the ground. I think in having a conversation around innovation, especially as more and more we start to see ecosystem building as blurring the lines between what did we used to think this government was responsible for, what did we used to think philanthropy was responsible for, and what did we used to think private enterprise was responsible for, we're finding out that all three of them are starting to, whether they like it or not, become way more enmeshed in the work of trying to create opportunity for new innovation and new entrepreneurs.
They're
and
all
as
in
they
that
do,
sandbox.
Yeah. As they do, the question, what are we innovating for? Whom are we innovating for?
You tell us.
Oh.
Cheers to all the innovators.
Yes. Yeah, if I had a drink in my hand. Clink.
Salute.
There you go. Okay, we want to know what you want to hear. Obviously, if you're in this space, especially, we would love to hear from you. If you're not in this space, we'd still love to hear from you. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're working in innovation at an organization,
Or you're just an individual with a strong opinion.
yeah, we want to hear from you. You can email me. It's just paul@stargarden.com. Just spelled exactly like Paul.
Or you can email me at paul@stargarden.com as well. I get too many emails.
Nice.